Hello my friends, Thomas with Alpha Concepts here. If you're not aware, 850,000 people lost power this week, and 80,000 of those people right here in Illinois. And that's why it's so important that we be prepared for power outages, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. This morning I woke up and my entire timeline on Facebook was people either complaining that the power was still out 18 hours later or praising the power company for getting the power turned back on. Some of those posts were life and death, as one person just had some baby goats on her farm and she needed power for heating the baby goats, obviously in freezing temperatures outside overnight. So, you know, not having power can definitely be a matter of life and death. And like I said, this was pretty widespread with 850,000 people affected. On this channel, we usually discuss firearms. We usually discuss firearm safety, training techniques, guns, but not all threats are violent encounters. Obviously, it can be a threat to our way of life if we lose power for an extended period of time. We've got to be prepared for whatever threat is plausible. That isn't just violent encounters. That's something like a massive power outage. So let's go through and let's discuss some things that you should do now to be prepared for the next power outage, because these things actually aren't rare. I did some web searching and I'm going to share some statistics with you in just a second. But this is going to happen again and we need to be prepared. So let's first talk about some of the recent power outages and then let's talk about ways that we can be prepared for the next one. I've got a little cheat sheet here because remembering all the numbers could be a little bit difficult. 850,000 people affected by a power outage seems like a pretty big deal, and of course it absolutely is, especially for the people who are affected. But if we go to 1965, 30 million people in the northeast of the United States as well as parts of Canada were affected. Now, 1965, I wasn't even born yet, and one might think that we've got the power grid all sorted out. Obviously, one would be wrong, because in 2003, 45 million lost power. In 2011, in the Southwest, 2.7 million lost power. In 2012, 4.2 million lost power, and it took approximately 10 days in some areas to get the power turned back on. I want you to imagine right now, stop and think, 10 days without power, what would you do? And that's why it's so important that we be prepared. We also won't even talk about Hurricane Sandy, which took weeks in some areas, some parts of the United States, weeks without power. It's incredibly important that we be prepared for these instances. What do we need? First and foremost, a generator. That's what prompted this entire video. I asked everybody that was posting that power was out, power was out, power was out. Do you have a generator? Most of them said no. So that's, obviously starts right there. Is if we are worried about not having power, let's do something to allow us to have power. So we're going to talk more about a generator later in this video, but there's some other items you need as well. Okay. Water. Water is very important. Okay. If you lose power, the pumping stations might lose power. That means you might lose fresh water supply coming into your house. You need drinking water. Maybe the sewage treatment plants have lost power, which means even if the pumping station didn't lose power, you might not want to drink the water that they're pumping. It could be contaminated. So having bottled water, having some kind of water treatment device would be very important, and right at the top of the list. Batteries. Batteries are important because we've come to rely upon our devices, our communication devices especially. Something like a cell phone that keeps us in contact with the outside world. It's very unlikely that if we have a power outage, is that going to affect the cell phones, but it could. Cell towers could be affected theoretically. Maybe having a radio or something like that that runs on batteries will allow us contact with the outside world as well. Flashlights, because we need to see. If the power goes out, the lights go out. We need to see because bad things happen in the dark. Bad things could be as simple as, tripping on something and bumping your shin on some furniture. Bad things could be as severe as a looter or something like that. So you definitely want to have flashlights and batteries to operate those flashlights. You want to have other items in the house like non-perishable foods. You know, if the power is out for a day, it's unlikely that the food in your refrigerator is going to spoil unless you keep opening and closing the refrigerator, letting the cold out. So if the power goes out for a day, you'll probably be fine with what you have on your fruits and your veggies and your meats that are in the fridge. But if it's an extended period of time, you need to eat. You need non-perishable food items. You need items, canned foods, things that you can store on a shelf for a while and get to in an emergency situation. You're going to want to have cash because cash is king. Rumor has it that the federal government wants to eliminate cash. When it happens, we can revise this video. But until then, you want to have some cash. Because if the power goes out, the stores might not be able to process your credit card transactions. You know, personal history, and this has happened before, but personal history, we used to get a lot of floods in the town where I live, and I remember specifically one flood, 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm rushing to Home Depot desperate to get pumps. I was not alone. There was a line of people, and thankfully Home Depot was letting us in an hour early, an hour before they actually open up. But the thing was, their credit card terminals weren't awake yet, and so they were only doing cash transactions only. So again, that's something to consider, is having a stash of cash, especially in a long-term outage event. You're going to need that cash as well. Hygiene items are important to have as well. You know, we take for granted just flushing the toilet and waste going away. In an emergency, if the water's not pumping, you still need to use the washroom. So you're going to want to have some hygiene products on hand. Wipies might be important. You know, being able to clean our hands, be able to clean our face, being able to clean other body parts is definitely very important. Maybe some hand sanitizer, a first aid kit, which you should already have already. You know, these things are important because hygiene doesn't go away. You don't want to skip these essentials. Some other items you're going to want to have on hand is maybe some board games or books, things to keep you busy, especially if you have kids. My kids, they've become so dependent upon electronics, phones and laptops and tablets and televisions that they wouldn't know how to keep themselves busy. So board games would be a great thing, especially, like I said, if you have children, to keep yourself busy. Now, we can go on and on and on with the list, talking about manual can openers, a shovel, buckets, things that you probably already have in your house anyways. But let's get back to generators, because that's originally what prompted this video. And let's talk about the type of generator, the size, and just a little bit. And by no means am I a generator guru by any stretch of the imagination. I have a couple generators. I've used them many times for many things. I know a little bit about generators, and kind of let's just talk about what you might want to look for when you're purchasing a generator for your house. First off, you can probably get by with a portable generator. You likely do not need a whole house generator. Of course, if you want to power your entire house, then that's a different story. But a whole house standby generator, I can only imagine would cost you between $5,000 and $10,000 if you paid a contractor to install it. And that's just a guess. If you've got a whole house standby generator, let me know if I'm wrong there. But I'm going to guess I'm in the ballpark. You can probably get by with a $500 generator, nothing special. Now, obviously, you get what you pay for, and a more expensive generator is going to have more features and more power. The more power means the more devices you can run. So that's something that you would need to sit down and really think about. Well, how much power do you need? That depends upon how much power you use. It depends upon how much devices you want to charge. There's a difference between peak watts and running watts. Peak watts is the peak. You don't want to run your generator at max. So your running watts, if you want it 2,000, if you anticipate using 2,000 watts, then you're going to want to get a generator that has a minimum 2,000 running watts, which might be something like a 3,500 peak. Also think about powering that generator. If you're going to store that generator in your garage, most generators are gas. And if you're going to store it, you know, maybe for years, gas can gum up, okay? So there are other options. There's propane generators, there's natural gas generators, there's tri-fuel generators that allow you to switch between gas, propane, or natural gas. But if you are storing that, do not store the gas in it, which means you need to store gas somehow if it's a gasoline generator. I would recommend maybe having a metal gas can. They're of a much higher quality than the plastic ones. They seal tighter, much less likely to spill. That's personally what I use for storing gas, but gas doesn't keep very long. So generally what I do is it's the same gas that I use in my lawnmower, my snowblower, that sort of thing. So it's always reasonably fresh, okay? Also keep in mind the amount of gas that you're storing. How long will that power your generator? How long will, 1 gallon of gas, 3 gallons of gas, how long will it take your generator to burn through that? That's something that you need to think about if you're storing gas. So propane might be something that you consider for an emergency generator. You've got to sit down and you've got to figure out, what works for you, for your house, for your lifestyle, okay? All right, my friends, so we ran through kind of the bare necessities of what you're going to want to have on hand. Maybe a few things I skipped out, like candles and fire starter, batteries, absolutely. I'm pretty sure I mentioned batteries. I don't want to underestimate the necessity of being able to power the flashlights and all of those things that we're going to have. We spent most of our time talking about generators and water. Obviously, those are going to be at the top of the list. If there's any other items that you think are essential, put a comment. I want to hear from you. Like I said, also, if you think I got the budget, the $5,000 to $10,000 wrong for a standby generator, leave that comment as well. By no means am I trying to sell you these items, okay? But I am going to include some links for you guys to use. And if you use those links, I might get a couple bucks. If you don't use those links, get these items somewhere, okay? Obviously, using those links helps out this channel. But again, if you don't use the links, please get the items somewhere. Go get yourself a generator, get yourself some bottled water or water purification, get yourself, a first aid kit, get yourself a cache of batteries, things like that. Get yourself a radio. Get yourself some canned foods. Be prepared for the next event. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Be armed, be trained, and be alpha.